Hi, and welcome to the Scout Tee video sew-along. I'm Jen. I'm the owner and founder of Grainline Studio Patterns, and in this series I'll be walking you step by step through the process of sewing up this classic pattern. The Scout was our second pattern ever released, all the way back in 2011, and it's remained one of our most popular patterns to this day. This woven tee is perfect for beginners just getting started with sewing their own clothes, and also lends itself to modifications for more advanced sewers. We'll be covering not only the original Scout pattern in this sew-along series, but also the Scout sleeve variation pack, which allows you to switch up the sleeves on your Scout for more versatility. You can see here we have the cuffed sleeve. That's one of the options in the variation pack. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Scout pattern, I want to start by going over the pattern details. First off, I want to reiterate that the Scout tee is drafted for wovens. That doesn't mean you can't try to make it in a knit, but we won't be covering that in this sew-along. The Scout is properly fitted at the shoulders, and it falls into an A-line shape below the bust. It's comfortable to wear, easy to move in, and depending on the fabric you use, it works for many situations, from work to every day. The Scout comes with a cap sleeve, but through the use of the Scout sleeve variation pack, you can switch it up to any of the 4 sleeves shown here: petal sleeve, short sleeve, cuffed sleeve, or long sleeve. The first thing you'll need for this sew-along is the Scout pattern. It's available in our shop, which I'll link in the video description below, along with the links to the rest of the tools and supplies mentioned in this section. We offer the Scout in both paper and PDF format, as well as in both of our size ranges, so you can choose the type of pattern and size that's right for you. As we mentioned, the Scout is a woven tee, so you'll need to make it from a woven fabric. We recommend using something with a bit of drape to keep it from standing out away from the body. We'll discuss more about that in a few minutes, but you'll want to make sure you pre-wash your fabric using the same method you intend to use when washing your final garment. After fabric, the only other supply you'll need is thread. I like to use a high-quality 100% polyester thread like the ones available from Mettler or Gutermann. No matter what fabric I'm using, I use poly thread. It won't shrink after you've sewn your garment, so you won't have any surprises the first time you wash it, and it's also very strong. Now, in addition to supplies, you're going to need a few tools to get this done, and this is what I found works great for me. Pretty much any pins you have laying around are going to work just fine as long as they're an appropriate size for your fabric. From left to right, we have clover flower head pins, glass head pins, and standard dressmaker's pins. Any of these options are great, but if you predict getting your iron near the pins, I'd recommend going with the glass head pins or the standard pins, as the plastic head can melt if your iron comes in contact with them. Since the Scout is meant for wovens, a universal needle will be fine. Match the size of the needle with the fabric you're using. Thinner needles for finer fabrics, thicker for less fine or more loosely woven fabrics. I love my 1/4 inch foot, which Bernina calls the patchwork foot, because of the accuracy it provides, but I recommend using whatever you're used to for the bulk of this project. You may also find an edge stitching foot helpful as well. They have a guide down the center of the foot that aligns with the edge of your fabric and helps you stitch a consistent distance from your edge. I'm not much of a rotary person, but these are the scissors I find most useful for almost every project I make. My Ginger bent-handled shears. I use these to cut out my fabric, snip, clip, and more. I use embroidery scissors to grade my seam allowances. You can alternately use duckbill scissors, but I find them a bit large and awkward for my small hands. Thread snips live next to each of my machines at all times. I couldn't sew without them. If you're using a pattern printed on standard paper, you may also need paper scissors to cut that out. If you're using the tissue, you can cut through that with your fabric scissors with no problems. But standard paper will dull them. You'll need a tape measure to take your measurements, as well as lay out your pattern pieces for cutting. Having an 18-inch gridded ruler handy is often helpful when laying out your pattern pieces or making changes to your pattern. You may also want a seam gauge for help pressing up your hems. You'll need a marking tool of some kind to trace out your pattern onto fabric. I like to use a chalk pencil. It has a fine lead that comes in multiple colors and it is washable. You can also use something like a Clover Choco liner. Just keep in mind that the colored chalk on these isn't washable. I also often just use a number 2 pencil. You're cutting off the line you traced when you cut anyway, and so it's not going to end up in your final garment. You'll also need an iron and ironing board. I'll be using my Laurastar Smart Eye ironing system. I've upgraded a bit since my last video, and I really love how light this iron is, along with the active board. Any iron and ironing board you have will be just great. You simply need something to press on and with. I also like to have a ham and sleeve roll handy for pressing curved bits and sleeves. If you don't have these already, they'll really up your sewing game. Now I want to talk a little bit about fabric selection for your Scout. I have 3 examples of fabric here, something a little stiffer, something in between, and something very drapey. So let's start with the drapey one. Here we have our most drapey Scout. This is made in 100% rayon. Very fluid. You can see how it flows. It just drapes right off the bust. It's very soft and comfortable. This is the 14 to 30 and the darts look great. It's actually very easy to sew. If it's the first time you're sewing a garment, you maybe want something a little more stable, but other than that, this shouldn't be a problem. And it's really kind of an elegant fabric, and it really changes the way the Scout looks. It's much more, I would say, a little more formal. Now here we have a cotton. This is just a standard cotton. It's a little more loosely woven than a quilting cotton. We'll talk about quilting cotton in a second. It's a gingham, and it gives it a little more of a sturdy look. So this will hang off your body. It's not going to drape quite in the same way you can see here. But the cuffs look great. You get a really crisp press, and you can see the difference between the two, just how drapey this is. So now I'll show you what's in between. So here we have a lightweight cotton. This is a little heavier than a lawn or a voile. It's much more drapey than a lawn, a little heavier than a voile. And this is a really great option. It's super easy to sew, super easy to wear. Something like this looks great in all 5 versions, the original and then the 4 sleeves. And it's great for like a first-time sewer who wants something easy to sew with that looks garmenty when you're done. The problem with quilting fabrics, like I said before, is they're woven with a very high thread count most of the time. And because of that, they don't have a lot of drape. So in a flowy, more A-line style like the Scout, it's just going to stand away from your body in sort of a tent formation. And if you're into that, that's totally cool. You do you. But if you're not, then I would steer clear of regular quilting cotton. It's just a question we've gotten from people over the years. How come mine sticks out in an A-line shape where the ones you're showing or the one so-and-so made falls differently? It's just because of the fabric. So you can see nice and drapey, soft drape. It's a soft drape. Little more stiff, but still falls away from the body nicely. Too many shirts. And the most drapey of all, the rayon. So I hope that helps you choose your fabric. I'm going to show you what we'll be working with now. I'll be sewing our samples in this rayon linen blend. It's 2-sided, so you'll be able to see easily, and I'll be using a contrast thread color so you can see where I'm sewing. But this is also a great option. It's kind of like the stability of a cotton or a linen, but the added drape of the rayon. We used this fabric for one of our Augusta samples, and we were just so happy with it. I ordered a bunch more for myself. So highly recommend using this type of fabric if you have access to it. All right, so that is it for the first episode of our Scout Tee video sew along. I hope I answered some questions and you're all ready to dive in with our next video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed to our channel so you don't miss any of our updates. I'll see you back here next time. Bye-bye.